let me be totally clear in saying that, and I've said this many times, I accept our intelligence community's conclusion that Russia's meddling in the 2016 election took place. Could be other people also. There's a lot of people out there.
There's a lot of people out there indeed. Joining us now is Yamiche Alcindor, the White House correspondent for the PBS Newshour and an MSNBC contributor, and Evan McMullin, an independent presidential candidate in 2016. He was also a former CIA operative and co-founder of Stand Up Republic. Jason Johnson is back with us as well. A lot of people out there, guys, but not a lot of people that the intelligence community has determined to have attacked our elections. They just came up with one, and that was Russia. What I find so interesting, Yamiche, is that Bob Corker said the dam is breaking. And while I think that might be going a little too far from what we've seen so far, we are seeing some Republicans we don't normally see coming out and distancing themselves or criticizing the president. Take Peter King, for instance. Peter King has been very fawning about the president of late, most especially. But listen to what he said to Fox News after that Putin-Trump summit.
First of all, to take the word of a former KGB agent and a liar like Putin over Dan Coates, a dedicated patriot who's director of national intelligence, appointed by the president himself, to me, and to do that on a world stage was, for me, indefensible. It's
not just Peter King or Jeff Flake or the Democrats that say this. It's also Mike Turner, a Republican from Ohio, today on MSNBC. Listen to this, Yamiche.
I think what's important, though, in this is that we really wanted our president at this time, because of the nerve agent attack that's happened in London, the invasion of Ukraine, the meddling in U.S. elections, the indictment that had just happened by the Department of Justice, to stand up for President Putin and to make very strong statements. When the American president does it, it certainly weakens overall even our allies' abilities to stand up to Russia.
Yamiche, why this? Why now?
I think President Trump's inability to strongly say that Russia meddled in the election, followed in the orders, and following the orders of President Putin has really put Republicans in a position where they are motivated to push back on the president in a way that nothing else has. I know we're talking about this being the worst week that the president had, but let's remember that there was the family separation week where he was separating hundreds of children, small children, from their families, and then had to change the policy because it was so terrible. Then you had Charlottesville, where he was saying that Nazis who killed a young woman were on the same moral playing field as protesters who were there to protest racism. So there's this idea that Republicans have watched this president do all sorts of things, but this time it seems as though because he's siding with someone who literally ordered the elections to be hacked and for political opponents of the president to be hacked, that this was kind of the thing that Republicans could not take, mainly because there's also the optics. I was in the press conference where Vladimir Putin was literally smiling and smirking most of the time because he felt so great about all the things that President Trump was saying.
Evan, what do you think?
Look, I think that this is going to cause an incremental shift or weakening of Trump's support base. But if we're looking for a great shift or a great weakening of that base, I just don't think we're going to see it. I mean, I sort of look at this situation as much like the Access Hollywood tape, where it's so egregious and so terrible that members of Congress, for example, have to come out and say something. But within a couple of weeks, they've backed off. And when I talk to members of Congress, Republicans who are now speaking out about this, they say, look, I'm doing it because it needs to be done. There's an opportunity to do it, but I'm also thinking about re-election, and I'm not going to be able to keep doing it. And that's the reality. His support base, just one thing, his support base, the Republican Party, is still 71, depending on which poll you believe, 71 to 79% supportive of the way he's handling Russia, which is incredible. Now, that's lower than his overall approval rating within the party, so that's probably going to create some downward drag. But it remains to be seen how much.
I think we forget just how bad the Access Hollywood tape week was.
It was bad.
50 current and former Republican lawmakers came out and said that they couldn't support him. They either weren't going to vote for him or they were just not going to vote at all. Jason, but do we make too much out of just the Donald Trump supporters? After all, Donald Trump won with some very narrow margins in some key counties, because of independents and because of some soft Democrats who wanted to take a chance on something new.
Yeah, the soft Democrats are gone, and the independents aren't really feeling Donald Trump. I think, Katie, the most important thing to understand about this president, and this is what really has a lot of Republicans concerned, and why you got 46, 47 of them dropping out, deciding they didn't want to run again, is Donald Trump has no coattails. His personal popularity is impeccable. Republicans still like him. They think he's great. They think he's interesting. They think he's accomplishing things. But that does not trickle down to Republicans. The party as a whole has not demonstrated that they are as invulnerable to scandal. So whenever Donald Trump blows his nose, everybody else gets a cold and has to run around with Kleenex. So if this is his worst week, it's only his worst week until his next worst week. And the more worst weeks he has, it's going to just be a political Groundhog Day for Republicans, and they're going to be in trouble because he's not going to come out and say it.
Will it, or is it like he got a stain on his shirt, and instead of taking off the shirt and getting a new clean shirt because there's a very obvious stain, he's just stained his entire shirt with more mustard and ketchup and hot sauce and whatever, to the point where you just look at that shirt and you say, wow, that shirt's supposed to be a mess. It's supposed to look like that. Yamiche, that worked to his advantage during the election.
I think the fact that he's throwing issue after issue on the wall, and some of them are sticking, but they're not all sticking, shows you that he has this kind of, this really method to overwhelm the news cycle, to overwhelm Democrats, to overwhelm political opponents and Republicans, so that there's so many things that they need to comment on and respond to that nothing is really sticking to him. I think that's probably, he calls himself the stable genius. If there is anything politically genius about this president, is that he does so much that people forget how terrible things were.
Max Boot, foreign policy advisor to John McCain and Mitt Romney, wrote a Washington Post op-ed titled "How I Miss Barack Obama," which is crazy for Max Boot to write something like this, or would have been crazy if you were talking about this 2 years ago. He referenced Obama's Mandela speech that came out earlier in the week. He says, "It can be depressing to think about our current predicament under a president whose loyalty to America is suspect, but whose racism and xenophobia are undoubted. However, Obama's speech gave me a glimmer of optimism, and not only because he cited Mandela's example of persistence and of hope, he reminds me that just 18 months ago, can you believe it was so recently, we had a president with whom I could disagree without ever doubting his fitness to lead. We can have one again."
Right. Well, Max Boot, as usual, is right on target with this. I mean, you just think back to the presidents we've had in the past, and of course there are policy disagreements from one side to the other. No one is perfect, and neither is president or otherwise. But we've had presidents where we haven't had to wonder whether they're actually loyal to the country. That's what we're dealing with here. And I think what we saw this week, and I think what was made clear to most people who are following this, is that we do have a president now who does not fit within that framework. This is a president who, in my view and in the view of many now, I think accurately, is not a loyal, is not performing his duties in a loyal way, if I can be diplomatic and say it that way. But that is the situation we're in, and I pray to God that we get back to a situation in which no matter what party controls the White House, we trust their leadership.
This week's performance made it perfectly reasonable to once again ask, legitimately, does Russia have compromise on Donald Trump? Yamiche Alcindor, Jason Johnson, and Evan McMullin. Guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.